to try to plug gaps in Ukraine's arsenal of shells. And now we have the straightforward admission that this whole attempt back last summer and since then, to try to counterbalance or match Russian artillery advantage, that's been abandoned. And what we also learn is that because the United States has given up trying to provide Ukraine with the necessary artillery to counter the Russians, that they've now switched to providing armoured vehicles instead. Bradleys, Marders from Germany, Strikers, perhaps ultimately, if they can persuade the Germans to change their mind, as I expect eventually they will, Leopard 2 tanks as well. So, these latest deliveries are really the product of the inability of the United States to match the Russians on this battlefield in what has become clearly an artillery war. And the US is trying apparently to find some means of altering the nature of the battle. It's trying to get the Russians to, or rather the Ukrainians, to find some means with tanks and armoured vehicles to operate in ways that are presumably less vulnerable to Russian guns. Now, I'm not a military person. I don't know how that's done. I've read articles by people who've had backgrounds in artillery, in armoured warfare, and I've listened to videos by them. Both Colonel Douglas McGregor and Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis both seem deeply sceptical that this is possible. But anyway, the big takeaway is Ukraine is in an attrition war. It's the first time I've seen this straightforwardly admitted. In Reuters, certainly, I think even in the British media in general. It is losing that attrition war. It's been trapped into attritional fighting in Bakhmut, and this is turning out into a disaster. And however strategically important Bakhmut actually is, Ukraine cannot win an attrition war. So it must therefore pull back, and rather than go on an offensive at any time soon, it needs to devote weeks, perhaps months of time to try to familiarize itself with all these new armored vehicles that the West is providing. Now, if you think about that, that is a fairly bleak assessment, and it is an assessment that is seen as bleak also by Alexei Arestovich, Zelensky's former spin doctor, who was sacked a couple of days ago in circumstances where he probably told the truth about a Russian or alleged Russian missile attack on a residential building in Dnipro, the city of Dnipro. Anyway, Arestovich has now given some interviews, and in his very latest one, he appears to be casting doubts on Ukraine's prospects in the war. He seems to understand, and presumably, until a few days ago, he was somebody who was getting classified intelligence, information. He seems to understand what this Reuters article is hinting at, that Ukraine has found itself trapped in an attrition war, which it is losing, and which the Russians are in a position to conduct on their terms. And we can see that on the latest situation on the battlefields. We see how even if the Zaporozhye offensive is intended as a diversionary exercise, it's having the effect of drawing Ukrainian troops and away from other critical part of the battlefields, how the Ukrainians have been forced to throw in apparently reserves that they were preferring to hold back, trying to plug the gaps in Zaporozhye, how Ukrainians finding it difficult to sustain an attrition war. And there's been lots of articles, including there was that article by Big Serge, he discussed this as well. Brian Levy talked about it extensively, about how Ukraine has been losing machines and vehicles at staggering speeds, how it started with a very large tank fleet, large numbers of armoured vehicles at the start of the war, how all of those were lost by midsummer, how the United States and its allies then managed to replace at least some of those lost weapons, those lost tanks and armoured vehicles with former Soviet weapons drawn from former Warsaw Pact arsenals that have now that now are possessed by countries that have now become parts of NATO. How over the course of the summer, new brigades with this new equipment was built up, but how that's also been largely lost over the course of the fighting in the autumn, fighting in Kharkiv and in Kherson region. And the United States is now telling Ukraine, look, we can only do this up to a point. We can't realistically match the Russians in artillery. That is beyond our power to do. We can send you armoured weapons, but our very, very strong advice to you is don't do the same thing again that you did in the autumn, which is fritter this new supply of armoured vehicles in further offensives and pull out of battle and avoid getting drawn into situations where the Russians are able to make effective use of their massive artillery advantage. Now, as I said, how the Ukrainians are able to do that, would be able to do that, how the Ukrainians can use tanks and armoured vehicles in a way that somehow negates the Russian artillery advantage, I myself cannot see. But anyway, that does appear. Well, in the meantime, we have further tension within Ukraine. We've had an apparent admission from Ukraine, something very widely circulated, I'm not sure that it is at all, that Solidar has fallen to the Russians. A BBC journalist, the BBC was reporting that Ukrainian soldiers are admitting that Ukraine has pulled out of Solidar. I've not yet seen anywhere any sign of any official admission of this from any senior Ukrainian government official. And that admission has not yet been made, despite what the BBC appears to think. But again, we see that Ukraine is perhaps resistant to this advice because the unwillingness to admit that Solidar has been lost, and by the way, some of those Ukrainian soldiers that the BBC spoke to were apparently talking about counterattacks to retake Solidar. Well, they've probably been briefed by their Ukrainian superiors to say that. We see that there doesn't seem to be
Let's drink to you. Let's drink to me. To better times. May never be. Forgive all strife. Forgive the pain. Thank you, darling. Feel like me. Feel like one. One. Feel like me. Without you. We'll drink and fight. We'll drink and run. All fools in time. Don't try to hurt. I'll drink to that. I'll drink alone. I'll drink it all. Mom, feel like you. Please come to me. Forgive the pain, miss you, darling. Feel like we.
listen to the advice the Americans are giving, both about avoiding attrition war and about avoiding offensives. They seem to be still determined, despite American advice, to try to hold on to Bakhmut. They're still talking about counterattacks in Solidar. They may not, I suspect they're not officially admitting that Solidar
Sorry, I
has
didn't make it to the meeting. I only now walked out of Solheim's place. She found out about the trinket, and I had to return it and endure another lecture. I can't believe she isn't capable of understanding the potential of this place. I hope they do something about the heating. I don't want to spend eternity freezing my fucking ass off. Yeah, you heard right. We're staying. I might have spiced up Red Fowl soup a little.
Celebrate! Haha! Party to the top! Moving on and on forever! Igor brought him here. Why isn't he fixing it? You paid for this bread?
Don't get greedy, Colt. Already got full ammo.